This is Unconventional Knowledge, a podcast from Geopolitical Intelligence Services that goes beyond the headlines to uncover the forces shaping our world. We bring you expert insights on global trends and economic shifts, helping you anticipate what comes next. By exploring future scenarios and their real-world relevance, we give you the knowledge to navigate uncertainty with confidence.
Hello, everybody. We have today the privilege of a discussion with Professor Karl-Friedrich Israel on the issue of Europe's potential economic advantages and how we can, on the old continent, make use of it. Karl-Friedrich Israel is professor of economics at the Université Catholique de l'Ouest in Angers in France. He previously served as professor at Saarland University in Saarbrücken and at the Institute for Economic Policy at Leipzig University in Germany. He completed his undergraduate and graduate studies in Berlin, Paris, and Oxford before earning a doctorate in economics from the University of Angers in 2017, with a dissertation on the costs and benefits of central banking. He received his habilitation from the University Paris Panthéon-Sorbonne in 2023 for research on neutrality of money and the unintended consequences of monetary policy. His broader research interests include macroeconomics, the theory of economic thoughts, economic methodology, econometrics, and Austrian economics. This is a very impressive curriculum and is the basis of a good discussion I believe we will have today. Hello and welcome, Professor Israel, and thank you
Hello,
for
Prince
participating.
Michael. It's my pleasure to be here.
There appears to be a problem with Europe's competitiveness on a global scale and an issue of relatively decreasing productivity. What do you see as the main reasons? This is an important question because decreasing productivity means also a problem for competitiveness.
Yes, absolutely. It's an interesting question, and it's a very complicated and complex question that deserves a layered answer. There are multiple aspects, of course, multiple causes that lead to the decline in competitiveness and productivity. If one really wants to go to the bottom of things, I believe that there is a cultural and political aversion in Europe. When we compare it, for example, to the US, there is an aversion to disruption. So I think that's the root cause of Europe's decline in competitiveness. There is a deep-seated political and societal tendency to fear disruption rather than embrace it as an economic opportunity. And right now, of course, we go through a phase of massive technological disruption, and this is handled very differently in countries like the US, here in Europe. So European policy elites often prioritize stability and predictability over experimentation and over competition and what Schumpeter would call creative destruction. So the political system, in a sense, rewards risk aversion. So the impulse in Europe is to protect incumbent industries, incumbent corporations, shielding workers from structural change, and so on. And I mean, there are good reasons to do that, but it comes at a cost, at the cost of reduced productivity in the long run. And from this cultural aspect, follow other factors that contribute to the problem. So because of this aversion towards disruption, there is a lot of regulatory overreach in Europe and a lot of bureaucratic inertia. The cultural preference for control translates into regulations when it comes, for example, to climate change and other technological disruptions. And the regulation tends to be heavy-handed, precautionary, and often it is hostile to innovation. So Europe leads the world, if you like, in regulating new technologies, but often before they even scale or really take off in Europe. And the result is legal uncertainty, high compliance burdens, high regulatory costs that simply suffocate entrepreneurship. There are a number of examples for these costly regulations that are often well-intentioned, but still costly from a business point of view. So, for example, we have the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, that has created huge compliance costs for, in particular, small businesses. And it hindered development of data-driven services. We have now the AI Act that introduces fairly rigid classification schemes. We have environmental regulations and product regulations under the Green Deal. For example, the taxonomy rules, we have the carbon border taxes, and so on. And these are all, as I said, well-meaning. There are good reasons for those regulations to be implemented, but they tend to be overly complex, and they are disproportionately harming small and medium-sized enterprises. And this leads into a situation where the big players, the big enterprises, do not have to fear the competition from the smaller and medium-sized enterprises that much, and so they tend to become lazy. They don't face as strong an incentive to continuously increase productivity and stay innovative and economically efficient. And also, of course, in Europe, we have a pretty rigid labor market, which includes relatively high firing costs and also high social charges. And this simply discourages flexible hiring and risk-taking in all businesses, and in particular also in startups. And lastly, I would emphasize that because of all of these problems that ultimately stem from a cultural societal preference for safety, we have relatively weak private investment in innovation in Europe. Yeah, so as a consequence of regulatory overreach, of bureaucratic burdens, productive private investment in Europe is relatively weak. Investors, for very good reasons, avoid sectors and economies where the rules are unclear or highly complex and where they are politically volatile. So venture capital funding in Europe, for that reason, is a fraction of what it is, for example, in the US, and particularly when it comes to artificial intelligence, biotech, or deep tech. So I think these are some of the main problems that Europe has when it comes to competitiveness and productivity.
Yeah, because I think we hear there quite a lot about the increasing gap in new technologies between Europe on one side and the United States, but also China and other sides. This is true, but there were always differences between different economic blocs on what they have the strengths and the weaknesses. Is therefore this sort of gap in technologies and new technologies such a big problem?
Well, it's true that Europe is behind in some technologies, AI and so on. But in my view, that's not necessarily a big problem, and it's not necessarily a sign of a crisis in Europe. So the world, as you just pointed out, benefits from the international division of labor and a specialization that comes with it. And Europe, in my views, at least, still leads, and I think this can be shown, still leads in areas that matter deeply to the global economy. So no country or region really needs to lead in every technology. And so that's why it's not necessarily a problem that Europe is not the leader in AI. The idea that Europe must dominate AI or other areas, let's say quantum computing or semiconductor production, you name it, it's not necessarily that Europe leads all of these areas, and the idea that it should lead in all of these areas misunderstands how the global economy works and how the international division of labor would work. In a system of open trade or relatively open trade, different regions can and should specialize in different areas according to comparative advantages. So Europe doesn't need to be a tech superpower across the board. It would completely be sufficient if Europe remains world-class in the areas where it already has an edge. Now, overreacting to the tech gap that clearly is there, it could lead to very bad policies, in my view. And that's the real danger. The real danger is that Europe tries to now imitate others, especially China, with a heavy-handed industrial policy or with government-led tech strategies. And I think this would be the wrong approach. That would only deepen Europe's structural problems. It would add bureaucratic burdens, bureaucratic delays. It would lead to misallocated resources and more political capture of innovation. Instead, what Europe should be doing is to maintain relative openness, and it should reduce regulatory burdens, and then let private capital drive the direction of innovation. And this might imply that Europe will not be a world leader in every aspect of artificial intelligence, but I think if we reduce bureaucratic costs and regulatory burdens, there will at least be some areas also in the new technologies where Europe can actually become a leader, because a lot of the talent that is necessary is in Europe. And if we combine that with sufficient amounts of private capital, this could be scaled into globally successful businesses.
And if we look at the now highly criticized trade surplus of Europe with the United States, actually, doesn't that indicate a sign of strength in the manufacturing industry of Europe? And what are the strengths? And I think, as you said, also, Europe could use now, let's say, American technologies to even improve the efficiency of its manufacturing.
Yes, absolutely. So I think Europe's trade surplus can be interpreted as a sign of strength, especially in manufacturing, as you point out. But the challenge to me seems to be to preserve that strength, and in particular in the face of rising regulatory burdens and also rising energy costs, as well as talent shortages and talent outflows that we observe. currently and over the past decades. So overall, if we let the private sector operate freely, it will probably continue to deliver, precisely because we still have a comparative advantage in manufacturing, and in some other areas we still have a competitive edge over the United States. So in that sense, the trade surplus is a good sign. It's an indicator of economic strength. It shows that the industrial base of Europe is still delivering value in the global economy. The areas that are most important here, I would say, are machinery and engineering products, high-end manufacturing, also the automotive industry, to some extent pharmaceuticals as well, luxury goods and high-end manufacturing and design. So these industries remain globally competitive because they combine technical excellence, they combine long-standing reputations and high trust and quality. So we clearly still, Europe is clearly still relevant, but the strength is not guaranteed. It is under pressure in many ways. So this surplus that we see should not lead to complacency. Many of those sectors that I mentioned are highly energy intensive. They are export dependent, and they are vulnerable to overregulation, just as any other sector. So what Europe needs to do in order to reinforce its comparative advantage in manufacturing and some other areas is the following, and it depends on affordable energy. Yeah, so this is under threat by EU climate and energy policies. It's a big problem. It depends on global market access. This is threatened by rising protectionism that we see all around in the world economy. And Europe's competitive edge also depends on skilled labor, and that's threatened by demographic developments in Europe and talent outflows. And lastly, it depends on capital investment. And those are threatened by regulatory uncertainty and regulatory costs, as outlined before. So there are a number of things Europe should be doing in order to preserve its comparative advantage. And, in particular, regulation, again, matters. Yeah, environmental and social regulations increasingly affect not just the new technologies, not just AI, deep tech, etc., but it also affects negatively to traditional industries. So we have ESG reporting burdens, we have the EU taxonomy restrictions, we have the carbon border adjustment mechanism. All of these introduce massive costs for businesses, and they introduce frictions in the markets. So the Green Deal overall has good intentions, yes, but it risks becoming a deindustrialization program for Europe. And that's not necessarily by accident. There are a number of high-ranking advocates of Green Deal policies that explicitly say, yes, this will lead to deindustrialization. This is actually what these policies intend. But we have to be very clear about the effect on the general standard of living in Europe. If we deindustrialize, the standard of living will decline.
And I think, isn't it, with all good intentions, the idea of the industrializing in Europe would in general, I would say, mean industrialization happens somewhere else. It will not decrease the global output of that. I think this might be one of the misconceptions, and I think another, and I wanted to ask you about that, the misconception which might have been, which we heard quite frequently, Europe is such an important market that it can stand regulatory standards, which will then, because it will be a precondition to access to the market, become global standards. And this might be a mistake, and the access to the market is certainly interesting, but maybe not, but maybe overestimated from the European point of view, and thus actually limiting the possibilities of their own industry in innovation, etc.
Yes, absolutely. So to the first point, if Europe deindustrializes, the world overall will not deindustrialize. There will just be a transfer of industries to other countries. The capital that is currently invested in European industries will just be invested elsewhere. And so on the global scale, if the goal is to protect the planet and so on, then yeah, that won't help, because the industrial production will just be relocated to other regions where presumably environmental protection laws are not that rigid, and probably overall the end result might even be a net negative for climate protection. And then, yes, there is this impulse in Europe that Europe wants to sort of influence global standards and rules through its own regulations, through the regulations of new technologies and so on. And that's it's just an understandable impulse, but trying to lead through regulations without innovation is sort of a classic case of the tail wagging the dog. Yeah, so it misunderstands what comes first. If you want to influence global regulations and rules, you have to be first innovative and you have to be a leader in certain areas. Europe still is a leader in many areas, but it seems to be losing that position. So Europe should focus on being an attractive place to invest and build and test new technologies. It should not just try to be the best place to file compliance paperwork. Yeah, if Europe remains competitive, if Europe preserves its competitive edge in certain areas, it will play an important role in setting global rules and standards. So we can understand the ambition, but we have to understand what is necessary to make that ambition of influencing international rules a reality. So it seems to me that Europe tries or wants to leverage its regulatory power, for example, to influence areas like AI in terms of privacy rules. It also wants to influence sustainability regulations and in general digital markets and so on. But this cannot become, this impulse to regulate and influence international rules cannot become a substitute for innovation. It is rather a byproduct of it. So you can't lead the rules of the game if you're not in the game anymore. You have to remain a player in the game in order to be influential. Otherwise, the other players in the global economy won't listen. So the famous Brussels effect, as it is called, by which Europe influences global standards, to me doesn't seem to be what it used to be. And the idea that EU regulations automatically become global standards because of market size, that's less true today than it was 10 or 20 years ago. The global tech landscape is now multipolar. We have the US, we have China, and they are not waiting for Brussels. They're building their own models. And it seems to me also that in cases where Europe influences or tries to influence regulations, like AI, it tends to protect non-European businesses, primarily the big US tech giants. So it's not only harming its own smaller potential competitors for these tech giants, it also strengthens the predominant position in the markets of the US giants. So in that sense, we can say that the impulse to regulate is even in some situations directly counterproductive to Europe's own businesses.
If I hear that, basically, I think Europe might put, let's say, a really certain focus on certain ways like the specialty manufacturing, etc., high quality products, etc. And I think it would be wise doing that, and wise also to use technologies, maybe American technologies, etc., to enhance and increase efficiency. But there's also, I think, more and more in a fragmented world, also a strategic view to see how can, let's say, Europe maintain also to have affordable energy on one side, but also a certain security for certain parts which they need to get from outside for the economy.
Yes, exactly. I mean, when it comes to international trade, there are not only economic considerations that are important. Economics is very simple when it comes to trade. Free trade is, from an economic vantage point, the best thing we can have. It's efficient. It tends to increase the standard of living everywhere. But of course, there are dependencies that emerge in free international trade, and hence there are geopolitical considerations that come into play. If we don't want to be dependent on certain other countries, we might want to strategically think about how we can become independent, how we can become either dependent on other partners or make it ourselves. But I think this can be very, very dangerous. Right now we see, as I mentioned earlier, all around us a retreat to more protectionism by the US under the new Trump administration, as well as in China and in some other countries. And some people argue now that, well, in such a situation, remaining open and being in favor of free trade can be very harmful. But I think that's wrong. Europe still needs to stay open and competitive if it wants to be successful. If Europe too retreats to protectionism now, this will backfire and harm Europe even more. So I think the right way to go about this problem is to stay relatively open, and Europe has not been a prime example of open trade in the world over the past decades. We have to admit this. Europe too has been relatively protectionist. But in my opinion, it should try to stay relatively open. It should try to stay competitive. Europe is a relevant market still in the world with 450 million consumers. And if Europe insists that free trade is the way to go, or let's say relatively free trade is the way to go, I think they can reach diplomatic success in convincing other partners to stay relatively open too. So Europe in that regard could maybe lead by good example and stay open and try to convince others to do the same.
I think this is quite optimistic, or let's say forward-looking, and I think for our discussion that actually, and putting it a bit together, Europe can leverage its advantages if it doesn't over-regulate on one side, but stays an open market on the other side. Thank you so much for this talk. I think this was very helpful, and I wish you a very good day.
It was my pleasure. Thank you very much.
That's it for this episode of Unconventional Knowledge, a podcast from Geopolitical Intelligence Services. Thank you for listening. New episodes are released on the first Monday of every month, so subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to stay updated. For more analysis on global affairs with a detailed focus on future scenarios, visit GISreportsonline.com. And if you'd like to explore how any of the trends discussed today could affect your business or industry, email us at advisory@gis.li for a consultation or a custom report. We'll see you next month.